Welcome to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. Time to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. WGA West Asian American Writers Committee Chair Christina Wu speaks with Expats creator, showrunner, and filmmaker Lulu Wang about her Amazon series, authentic representation, transitioning to television, and much more. Next up, WGA West member John Terry Gatson talks with Ridiculousness writers and new Writers Guild members, Aaron Conroy and Greg Edwards, about the fight to achieve their first ever WGA contract, the power of solidarity, and more. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. And now, Christina Wu in conversation with Expats creator showrunner Lulu Wang.
Hello, welcome back to Third and Fairfax. I'm very excited to welcome in Lulu Wang, the creator and showrunner of Expats, now on Amazon, and the writer and director of The Farewell. Lulu, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Very excited to talk to you about Expats and your writing process. I kind of just want to dive right in. Expats is based on a book. What drew you to the book? What about it was sort of screaming out to you? I think especially coming off of The Farewell, and I'm sure you had so much to sort of take your pick of. What about this sort of spoke to you the most?
Yeah, I read the book while I was doing the press tour for The Farewell, and I was not thinking I was going to go into doing a TV series, but the book was just so mesmerizing. Janice Y.K. Lee wrote it, and I've always been fascinated by Hong Kong. There, is historical parallels. Like my parents left Beijing in 1989, and so I've always sort of thought about like Hong Kong and the plight of the city and the people there, and the diversity that's there. And then this book really captures so much of that. It captures um, class and race and grief, and really it's a story about women and community. um, and I just love the world of it. And so it was, just talking more with Nicole Kidman, who brought me the book, and what she saw in this world, and whether or not we kind of were on the same page, saw eye to eye, and I would really have the freedom to bring my perspective to it.
I have a lot of sort of questions about adaptation.
Mm.
Reading the book, as you're reading it, are you thinking to yourself, like, okay, these are all the things that I want to keep, these are the things that I'd want to change or dive into more? Like, how do you approach sort of the cherry picking of stuff? Because I'm sure when you're talking to a producer, it's very different than, or maybe it could be very different than when you're speaking to maybe the author, obviously, who you want to be respectful of their work and, their contribution to and their origin story of what this is all about. But obviously, as a creator of something, you need to bring your own voice to it. And I'm just curious about what your process is like around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because I think, when you have source material, you can really take it so many different directions. And depending on who you're collaborating with, they're like, we want this, but we want, we like this part of it, but we want more of this. And so it is really important to say, well, what drew you guys to this book? And is it the fact that it's this wealthy expat world? Is it the glitz and glamour, or is it the critical eye towards that? Do you see it as sort of a celebration of wealth, because that's kind of what you are enjoying about this world? Or do you see it as a satire, or maybe neither of those? Maybe you really see it as for me, I saw it as all of these different types of people and the way that they grapple with pain, whether that's in a very isolated way, whether that's in a very selfish way, whether that is through community, um, and sort of through like joy, like we see so many of these women who have their own issues, but they're really out in the community and they know that they're not alone and they're not the only ones, so they don't, they just, so yeah, so those are the kinds of questions that I asked to make sure that we, I don't get so excited. I sign up for something and then it turns out that they have a totally different vision or they want to really lean into this element. And so I was really specific about like, okay, no, this is a really big project. It's got Nicole Kidman attached. But the things that like I love about this are the relationships, the characters, the nuances of the power dynamics, and it's not the like mystery of a missing kid and what happens, and it's not, like these plot devices, and it's certainly not a celebration of wealth.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to love about the show. And for me, in another universe, this show would be treated like a true crime and it would be tracking what Nicole Kidman's character is doing to like find her son. Was there any urging at any point to like add any more of that like detective element into the show? Because I personally loved the fact that it was so emotional, it was so expansive in exploring how everyone is dealing with different kinds of grief and loss and like different and like arguably some destructive ways. And to me that's more interesting than just a like breadcrumb. Yeah, and I'm curious because obviously there's producers, there's studio, there's the network. Like, at any point was there like, could there be more of a mystery here?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the direction that they initially wanted to take it. And I think that Nicole sensed that that wasn't right, that they were like, it's like, wait a second, I read this book, I loved it, I brought it, to set up. And sometimes, and that happens, right? And who doesn't love a great murder mystery or any crime drama? Like, I love them. It just felt like, okay, we're losing what the heart of of this particular book and this particular story is. um and so that's why I said very early on that in order for me to come on board to do it, that they had to support that vision. And I said pretty early on, like, we're not going to get the answers, and that might not appeal to certain audiences. um and you guys have to be okay with that, but I think that we're going to get something else in exchange, because you know you only have a certain amount of time. Once you start to go down the crime drama, direction, then that is the engine that you have to then follow, and that's, yeah.
I want to back up to something that you said earlier. um had you not considered television like ever? Like, do you really only want to stick to feature films, or was it just something about this project that maybe seemed unwieldy or a little bit scary to you? Yeah, I just love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's not that I didn't think of television. I guess it just seemed so daunting, this particular project. I have never been in a writer's room, I've never show run before. And I've only, not only, I mean, it's still hard to direct a film, an independent film, but the budget size, the size of the production was quite contained. Um, and so I think that it was just suddenly like, well, okay, how many episodes, who's directing them, am I overseeing other directors? Now I have to learn to show run, I have to learn to direct other directors. Like, it just was like suddenly like this whole other thing. And so then we talked about, okay, well, you can direct all of them, so you just approach it like a film. You don't
Hmm.
have to, think about like managing all these other creatives. I mean, managing other creatives like on my team, right, from the farewell and my department heads, but just in terms of like supporting different directors' visions, but then making sure it still retains the same vision all the way through. Like, so once we started talking about me directing all of them, then I was like, well, that's also daunting because it's like so many hours. And yeah, and so I think all of that was kind of, and I'm working with Nicole. Like, I just assumed that with somebody of that stature, that everything else goes up, right? Like, that's what they say. It's like, if the above the line starts to go up, the below the line all goes up, because it requires a certain size of a machine to
Hmm.
carry that. So um and I was like, but the story is so small and intimate. Like, how do we balance that?
Yeah, I'm really uh, craving hearing how you thought about scope and plotting everything out, and how much you would figure it out before entering the writer's room. Because I feel like I've been in rooms where the room is for like filling in, getting to the major plot points, but we already know all the major plot points, and that we already know the turns, we know how it's going to end. And then I've been in other rooms where it's more sort of like blue skying, and so yeah, what how did you prepare yourself for the room, and how did you find the process of show running?
Well, I love the room. I mean, I think the writer's room was probably one of the most magical times. I'd never worked with other writers before, so to be able to like throw ideas out and just have feedback right away, whether it's a bad idea or a good idea, like to just be able to like not have your own wheels, like your own brain shut it down before you really trial it. Like, all of that was so great. And we were really lucky because the room just had such great chemistry. um I think going into it, I wanted to have a sort of container, like a structure, a loose structure. So I knew that it was going to be 6 episodes. I knew that I wanted this fifth episode to be kind of this blowout, feature length um, episode that throws you into the city and gives you this different perspective and shows you, oh my gosh, look how much of a bubble we've been in with these expats, and like all of these other characters who have been in the background are now in the foreground. And you get a, rather than it being plot driven, it's like an onion that gets pulled back. We suddenly see all these other people who have feelings and were affected by this event that you never maybe really thought about. And so then I knew, working backwards, if we were going to throw everyone into throw the audience into the city in the fifth episode, that the fourth episode would be a bottle episode. They would be, which originally started with this idea of a bottle episode to save money. That's like not like, I didn't know that. I learned that later. But, I just thought about like what's so great about television is you get to like have different scopes and play with different like settings and space and the sense of space. So okay, we're gonna trap everyone in episode 4, and then I knew that episode 1, like in the novel, starts a year later. Like, it starts after the event has happened, and there's this sense of intrigue of, somebody, there's a perpetrator, Mercy, and there's a victim, Margaret, and but what happened, we're not quite sure what happened. And so I knew that I wanted to set up the pilot and the second episode as a question and answer, like companion episodes, so that we can really lead with intrigue. And then episode 2 would be sort of this heart wrenching, like, like a little bit more paced up, where you just kind of are, we originally called it like disaster drops out of a clear blue sky. That it's this beautiful day, and something's, you're going to find out, but you're not quite sure exactly when or where. So that was basically it. Like, I had those ideas. I knew I wanted to change the casting a
Hmm.
little bit from the book. Like, I wanted to, since Nicole is white American, I wanted Clark to be Asian American, and I wanted Hillary to be dark skinned, probably Southeast Asian. So that's also how I started forming the room around the identities of the characters and
Hmm.
who are the writers who can speak to a particular identity and a cultural identity and bring stories that align with that would be interesting. Um, and then that was it. Like it, so it wasn't really plot, right? It
Mm.
was just more structural. And then it was about like allowing the characters and all of the stories that these writers brought in to um fill in the 6 episodes.
I mean, that makes so much sense to me because I did have a question about, you know, in another universe, in another version of this show, there would be the story of the helpers sort of woven in more throughout the entire, like every single episode. But how you explained it, that to me makes so much more sense where we think we're in one bubble and then surprise, like we have to like zoom out and see the rest of the city, see what's going on politically with the city, see what's going on with the people who make the city run. Um, I just am so fascinated by that because I think, especially if you already have source material, it could be very tempting to just be like, okay, like chapter one is episode one, and we're starting when the book starts and we're ending when the book ends. And it sounds like you had a much more sort of like fluid approach. I'm wondering if your past work in adapting like real life things either happening to you or other people, did that come into play? Do you have like a philosophy around adaptation? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like even adapting in my own work, because I had done a podcast of the farewell for This American Life, and then was recognizing what worked, right? Because I had tried to write scripts just based on what happened. I tried to write the Hollywood version of that script, and then it was really by doing the podcast that I sort of found the tone and um and the size of the story. And so then I had to look at it and kind of go, how do I translate that tone that we did for radio into a visual language? So I see really that's like our job, right? If when in an adaptation is like what was great, so much of it what's great is often like characters and tone, and just like, well, how do we translate what we loved about this thing, what works about this thing, rather than reinventing it in a way that you then lose like the heartbeat, you know? um and I think that that's the reason it was so fluid, is because the book just has this beautiful tone that is like you don't know who to sympathize with. You know, one minute you're with this character and then the next minute you're with that character. And you know, working on the farewell, like I have such a respect for different people's perspectives in my family that I was like, okay, I'm writing this from my perspective, but I don't want it to like disrespect them, so I have to talk to all of them and make sure their point of views are well represented. And then so I kind of just did that with this as well, which is why I brought Janice, the author, into the writers room. I was like, okay, where are the perspectives here, and how do I honor all of them as much as I can, you know? So like, okay, Janice wrote the book, I don't want to like be in fear of like not deviating from her vision, but I also don't want to like completely ruin it, so let's bring her into the room. um and then in reading the book, I just like, you know, there were like Essie and Puri are characters that are in there, and then I thought, well, you know, let's give them a bigger storyline, because I just really liked this jealousy and it felt very real. And it was like, well, let's experience it through Margaret, but then let's also experience it through this woman who sacrificed her whole family and her whole life to raise someone else's family. And like that's got to be complicated. My grandma did that, you know. um she would watch other people's kids and then just like, and also she would like come and, you know, help raise my brother for a year and then go back to China. That's her own grandson, obviously, like blood red, but still like that kind of dynamic between women, between my mom, between her, of like who's doing a better job, what's the right way, and then also having to like leave them. Um and so yeah, so that was um the start of like looking at different perspectives. And then being from Beijing, I also thought like, okay, how do we make sure that the city is represented as a perspective and not just as a backdrop? And so like let's set it in 2014. It feels like that was like a pivotal moment for Hong Kong, um where there was still hope. And I think there was it was, you know, it was on the a brink of things, you know, changing, and you know, violence broke out, but there was still like a lot of hope and resilience. And so I thought, you know, that that was a great parallel for the journeys that these women were going through.
I wanted to know more about pinpointing that time because I believe it's not in the like there's no sort of talk of the cities and the the island's sort of political state in the book. Um, were you at all nervous at about portraying the umbrella movement, considering that you knew that you were going to shoot in Hong Kong? I mean, to your point about hope now, it feels kind of hopeless there now, politically speaking, at least. And were you scared or were you warned off that or was it fine?
Um, you know, we started writing it and we were like, well, let's see, you know, like it was definitely, we definitely were aware of what we were doing. But we got total support, you know, with the scripts, with the writing. I mean, and that was also one of my um what do you call it? Like deal points, I guess, when I came in and said I would do this. I was like, I just can't do it if we don't address this, because you know, art is always political. And for me, as a Chinese American from Beijing who left in 1989 to go to Hong Kong and shoot something and to not say anything is different than a Western person being like, oh, I'm going to make something in Hong Kong. Like, my silence around it would be like very, very loud. Right. And so just said I can't do that. And so that was always a non-negotiable for me. And of course, it was really tricky, you know, without getting too deeply into it, because as we were, as we finished writing the scripts, then, you know, it was the pandemic, you know, it was, you know, all of the stuff that was happening during that time that led to the Sedition Act. You know, there were a lot of arrests that were being made. So, um, yeah, so it's of course this like negotiation of like, yeah, you know, like yes, we wrote this, but things have changed, right? And so now you're actually going to shoot there, and so that was definitely something to navigate. But just throughout the whole thing, I was like, I like, what is that going to say about me? And also this, like, I came into it saying I can't do it without this, and like how do I navigate that afterwards, like to leave it, I mean, you know, and also like coming to an American country to be an artist and believing in freedom of speech, like I just felt like I have to be able to say that I could do what I wanted to do.
Well, I'm so glad you did. My family's from Hong Kong, and I feel like I don't know, there aren't tons of representations of modern Hong Kong. Like, obviously, we all like love Wong Kar-wai and stuff like that. But I think it's very easy to just see Hong Kong as another like glamorous city, and it's one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. I think it might surprise people to know that there is such a sort of like deeply rooted uh, culture of having live-in help. Like I didn't grow up in Hong Kong, but my parents did, and when I would hear about how they would speak about where they're from as a child, I was surprised to even hear about like it's not just the ultra wealthy who have helpers, it's sort of like middle class and above. And so just to expose the sort of modern version of that in this show, I think is was really important. And just to see also just all the different sites and to see the peak in Kowloon and like Central. It was I don't know, I thought that was really amazing and I'm really glad that you did that. Um yeah, I also feel like it would be a crazy thing to overlook, especially considering that you are talking about class. I mean, like, a question that I wanted to talk to you about is like, I loved how Margaret, Hillary, and Mercy all kind of represent different versions of like Americans abroad in
Hmm.
terms of they're all on the spectrum of being very or not so self aware of their privilege and their entitlement and how they are seen as Americans elsewhere.
Hmm.
Um, the farewell also deals with that a little bit. You know, Billy has her own ideas about how her family should be dealing with speaking to their grandmother. And I'm wondering if you see the two projects in conversation with each other, or like in a continuum with each other?
Yeah, I think that the farewell like was incredibly personal, of course, and through my own lens, it was just like, oh, it's a story about like, do you tell someone, do you not tell someone, right? That's just through my own personal lens. If I wasn't aware of the context in America in which I'm making a film, which is all Asian American, the language subtitle of it, and so then it became this like identity story about identity, even though like imagine if the farewell was just like a white family in San Francisco, like it wouldn't be necessarily an identity, although the identity is linked to it because it's about culturally like do we do this or do we do that, right? But it's also really just a moral question of like what's better. um and I felt like, okay, there's such like a limitation in how we speak about identity in America. And the farewell was like, it was really important to me to just get like all of the different levels of assimilation in there, like Billy, being having very bad Chinese, and but the parents speaking English, but one speaks better than the other because people have different experiences with language. Um and then her family in China who don't speak any English. And so just seeing all those layers. And then expats was even like, I took that and just like, not that I took it, like that's just the world, right? I just like expanded on that. Like you have so many different types of people. And even in the casting process, we were like, okay, this person is Asian American, but with an Australian accent, English speaking, but British accent, English speaking, but like a local accent. So you can tell that, they spent more time in Hong Kong. Like we were so specific about all of that to really encapsulate like what Hong Kong is, and and that's what's so great is you don't know. You meet someone Asian American, you've no idea by looking at them where they're from, where they've grown up, what languages they speak. They could be French speaking. Like, so, I mean, that's just what the world is now. And I thought that was really exciting to represent.
Um, this is a little bit of an in the weeds question, but I feel like there's always something in every writer's room. There's always like one or two things that are like really hotly debated, or that, you constantly are kind of going back and forth on. Was there anything in your room that like, once a week you're like, actually, I changed my mind? Or like something that just kept coming up that was sort of like either undeniable that you had to include and you wanted to include, but maybe weren't sure the way in? Or, yeah, was there anything sort of like a hot button topic in the room?
Well, I mean, the one that comes to mind immediately, because Janice made us all bracelets, it was like this ongoing joke. So in the book, Gus goes missing. Sorry, spoiler alert. Gus goes missing when they go to Korea. They go on vacation to Korea, and he goes missing there. But like obviously it didn't make sense. Like we wanted to the aside from production logistics, like we just wanted it all to be in Hong Kong. And so we had to find a place, like where would he go missing? And so we started talking about the night market, and oh, it'd be so fun. And then Janice was like, okay, as someone who lived in Hong Kong, no one wants to go to the night market. The night market is not fun. And then like Alice would be like, no, the market is super fun. It's like, and it's like kind of like it's kind I want to say it's kind of like a fair, maybe some people think of it as fun and some people don't. And also the night market's changed a lot, like like some of the streets sell like sex toys and things like that. And so it was this idea of like, okay, well, can we like fictionalize this? Like, is this a place where do we have to be so authentic that, because we need a place that's filled with a lot of people. um and so that just became this ongoing joke that like the family was like, oh, like let's go to the night market, it's so fun. And Janice kept being like, the night market is not fun, you're gonna get called out for this. Like,
But that's so interesting. Is Janice from Hong Kong?
she spent she grew up there, yeah, her
Okay.
family.
I only ask because to me, the like New York version of this is like, what if we set it in Times Square? And anyone who has even lived in New York for a moment would be like, boo.
Yeah.
But considering the fact that Nicole Kidman and her family, they are basically tourists, like it made sense to me whether or not it is popular with the locals that this would be something that people who don't have something like this in their where they're from would want to do.
Yes, yes, exactly. And also, we did have to like stretch a bit, and we were like, okay, we got to remove some of the stalls that are selling adult things, and we're gonna add like kites and things like that, you know. And so, yes, if you're local, you'd be like, that's inauthentic. But you're like, all right, but of all the things to like kind of be able to take creative license on, like, I think this is okay, right? Because at one point, these night markets did look like this. They were more
Hmm.
fun, and it's changed. But also, we're, and we did have to look at references from 2014 because there were a lot more neon signs. It
Yeah.
was a lot more lively. Like, that's changed, and so we were also recreating a slightly more nostalgic time period.
Okay, well, that brings up of course, a representation question. I feel like people who look like us, we get a lot of questions about representation. But considering that you in this show have both, and I don't even like saying West and East because it's like as compared to what? Like, but you have a very American mindset or like sensibility and a Hong Kong sensibility. Did you feel extra pressure? I mean, I guess like night market aside, um, getting that right, or just making sure that you were really getting specific with the details and the nuances? Like, I'm sure you did a lot of research, but I'd just love to hear more about how you kind of approached that.
Yeah, I mean, I that's why I really empower people on set, like every crew member, our script coordinator became a researcher as well. Like one of our assistant editors in post-production was also given a researcher position. Um, because I want people to tell me if something is not right, or if there's just a better way to do it, even if it's not right, like in choosing neighborhoods and like where people would, spend time. And um so yes, it was important to me to get it right because I want people who are watching it to kind of not be distracted, and to kind of be proud that this place is being shown in this way. And we, Anna and I felt a tremendous sense of responsibility because there's not a ton of international productions going into Hong Kong, and the city, I hesitate to even call it a city, but it's that's a whole nother conversation. But
Right.
the island is changing so much, um, that we knew, like, one of the places that we shot actually closed, the Mado Cafe, um, like the year after. And I remember talking to the owner about that and about, like, the neon sign and fights with the government about keeping it and all of this stuff. So we felt like tremendous responsibility in, like, okay, some of these images are like we're preserving this moment in time, and to be able to do it over like 6.5 hours, we have all this b-roll, like it's incredible. And so we definitely felt responsibility, but at the same time, you're also telling a fictional story, and at the end of the day, it's the same with the farewell. Like, I had to choose between a responsibility to my family and getting it right for them and everybody being ultimately happy with how they're represented, versus like just telling the story at the end of the day, the best story that I possibly can. And like my mom, after watching the movie, was like, "It's so wrong. You got me wrong. You're made the mom so mean. That's not how it is." And like people are always going to be unhappy. I think like it's something we don't talk about in representation. We say like, okay, we support each other, like it's great to see representation on screen, but try writing a memoir about your family and then you'll see how happy people are to actually be represented. You know what I mean? And sometimes
Yeah.
the closer it is, the more you're going to have an issue with it. And so I knew that there was no way I was going to make, They can't. I spent like, my mom read the script. She saw like some early cuts of the film, and she still hated it. So
You're
I
so
just
brave. I show my parents just like the end. Like, you don't need to see anything before that.
well, then I stopped. Then I was
Yeah.
like, like that's enough. Because my mom's like, well, why aren't you not telling this story? Why are you telling this particular perspective? And so I knew that we weren't gonna make every single person happy, and we were certainly going to get a lot of pushback from Hong Kongers, because when you have so little, you feel like this is the one chance people get to see, and you want them to see your everybody has their perspective. So we had to let that go to some degree too.
Well, I think you did a beautiful job, and you're right. I mean, it's we don't see Hong Kong a lot in like mass media, so I think you did a beautiful job. Um, I have one last question for you. It's sort of a like zoom out question. You know, so much of what we as writers have to think about is how we talk about who we are and our work and what we like to write. And I'm just wondering that as you've progressed in your career, how have you evolved speaking about yourself as a writer and a filmmaker and about your work? I mean, I guess the bigger your portfolio gets, the more context you have. Um, but yeah, like, it is how you spoke about yourself pre-farewell the same? Or like, what has changed for you, if anything?
I think that my sense of curiosity has gotten greater, in that like I spent so much time trying to like make a name for myself, like establish myself as a career, get people to take me seriously, that like it took up so much energy, and I now realize like how much like space it took up, and just like fighting to like do the thing, to just be an artist and to be seen as one, so that you can get permission. And I think now I'm freed to actually think less about myself. Like it's weird, right? Because I talk so much more about myself. There's more interest in people wanting to talk to me about my work. And like, aside from talking about it, for things like this, and hopefully in an educational way for people who are aspiring and working, I'm not interested in talking about myself or my work in my day-to-day life. Like, I'm interested in, other industries. Right now I'm like obsessively studying permaculture, and
Ooh.
you know um I'm reading about technology and AI, and I'm just like interested in other places, and then hopefully that curiosity aligns with whatever it is that I do next. Like, and I think more in terms of like, how am I a conduit for what's happening in the world? Like, how am I, like, I'm as I read things and absorb things and meet people, like, how am I a conduit for getting these messages out in the world? Because otherwise, like, it's so hard. Like, the industry is so hard. It's hard to make things. And if you don't feel like you're a conduit for something bigger, because the power of media is so massive, that you do have the ability to, like, through your story, change the way people look at a particular culture, about languages, about climate change, the narrative around that, around like so much, right? Narrative shapes how we see the world. And so I think more in that direction, rather than like, what do I want to do? And like, let me think about myself and, my identity, um, or my ego, or like, or even just, what do people want from me? Like, I don't think in that way anymore.
Hmm. Well, I think it's, the great irony is like the more you have in your body of work, the more sort of obvious all these questions are. But especially when you're starting out and like your body of work is small or people haven't really heard of you, like it is a sort of weird, like, everyone talks about brand. I don't know, like, but I can't help but like flinch when I hear that term being applied to, I mean, listen, we are in a spectrum of art and commerce, so like I can't sit here and be Pollyanna about it, but I think having the confidence to say what you said instead of being like, well, this is where I'm from and this is like the three things that I like to write about. It's so much more interesting to be like, well, these are the things that are like impacting the world, and this is my viewpoint on it. But I don't know. I could talk to you about this forever. I really appreciate you, spending your time with us.
Of course. Yeah. No, I was just going to say, and people, when The Farewell came out, all I got was Asian American, like family
Sure.
stories, family drama, identity. And then now that Expats is out, like I'm getting totally different things. And so you can like spend all your time trying to like talk to people to change their mind about what you're about, or you can just go make that thing. And so that's what I focus on, is like, okay, where's the space that I can land next where I can make the thing I want to make, that doesn't necessarily have to align with what I made before, and where I'm going to get the freedom to do that. Like, who are the partners that are really going to be supportive creatively, willing to take those risks?
Well, whatever you do next, we're all very excited for it. Congratulations on Expats. It is a beautiful, heartbreaking show. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was great talking to you. Really appreciate it.
You just heard Christina Wu speak with filmmaker Lulu Wang. Next up, John Terry Gatson talks with Ridiculousness writers Aaron Conroy and Greg Edwards about why a WGA contract is not so ridiculous.
My name is John Terry Gatson, and I'm here today with new Writers Guild of America West members Aaron Conroy and Greg Edwards, writers on MTV's Ridiculousness. Welcome, Aaron and Greg.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, welcome here. Welcome to the Guild.
Yes.
So tell us a little about yourself and how you came to write for Ridiculousness.
I'll go first, Greg.
Go for it.
I'm a former stand-up comic, which I think is going to be a refrain you hear when you talk to a lot of us at Ridiculousness. And I was living in New York for a while, and a friend of mine who was also on the show, he's one of the writers that we went through this with, he knew I was getting a little restless in New York, and so he said, I could probably get you a job as a segment producer on Ridiculousness if you're willing to move cross country. And I was like, yeah, why not be insane and just move cross country for a potential job? And so I ended up, temping for a while out here. Then this position did open up in a production department at Ridiculousness. And that was about 2015. And then around 2017, I believe, I moved into the writer's room. I was asked, based on my performance, they said, all right, you got the call up. And so I've been there. Yeah. So writing there since season 11. And I believe we're on season, I don't even know, Greg, season 40 something. No, so many seasons since that. Yeah, I mean, so it's just, it's been so it's been a minute, but that's how I got here.
Yeah, mine is sort of the same story. I'm a stand-up comedian. I was friends with Christian Duguay, who was a part of Ridiculousness at one point. And Teresa, who, I mean, what is Teresa at Ridiculousness?
She's everything.
She has so many roles. She's everything. She followed me on Twitter, and I came in and interviewed, and I got the seg producer job in like 2019. And then I became a writer in 2021. And yeah.
Oh, wow.
Same.
Yeah, actually, I have a little connection to Ridiculousness. When I got here, my first job was working for Adult Swim, and we were out in Burbank at the Hollywood. What was it? The Hollywood Studios? Were you there?
I
that weird building. Oh no, Glendale, not Burbank. It was Glendale.
In Hollywood Production Center.
Yes, that's what it was.
Oh yeah. Greg remembers that place too.
Yeah, for sure.
Nightmare parking garage.
Was like you guys were either on the same floor or up from us. And I feel like at one point there was some prank pulled, maybe by us. I don't remember, but
I mean, we have a bunch of, there's a couple of ne'er-do-wells on our show. So if there were pranks being pulled, it very well could have been us for sure.
So how long have you and your colleagues worked on Ridiculousness? I think you said you just started in the writer's room on 2021, but how long has there have been writers on it since the beginning? When did it start?
Yeah, there have definitely been writers on it since the beginning. A couple of the writers that we have that we went through this process with that are now in the guild with us have been there even longer than myself and Greg. My friend Ryan, who I mentioned earlier, He's been there and straight to the writer's room, I think, since 2012, 2014, something like that. But I mean, from the beginning, there was always a writer's room. So many people that have come and gone and, passed through the halls, that have gone on to other things and various roles within the company. But yeah, since day one, people have been writing scripts. People have been creating these packages. People have been coming up with the titles and putting it all together. Yeah, this is not like a new position by any stretch of the imagination. So We've always been there.
And that was a cool thing about this whole campaign was getting supported by all the previous writers of Ridiculousness too. Them hitting us up in Instagram or just texting us and just letting us know they support what we're doing.
Absolutely. Because there have been a lot of people walking through those doors, like so many. And so many of them are comics. So many of them are still working today. Hampton Yount, for example, Mystery Science Theater 3000, he was in that writer's room for a long time too. And it's just crazy. And so, yeah, like Greg said, the support has been just absolutely just overwhelming and just a real reason we were able to get through this process.
I love that because they're the ones who really know, what it is that you're doing and how worthy you are of a fair contract. Yeah. So then let's talk about like the start of that. When did you all start talking about joining together to like advocate for a better workplace?
Was it a year ago? It was like a little more than a year
ago. I want to say
right?
January of 2023. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's been, is when we first started very, very bare discussions. And I believe a lot of it came from a couple of the writers had already established relationships with guild members. And so I think that they had been talking to them and kind of feeling out, do you think that we have a leg to stand on here? Do you think that we could be considered eligible for membership in the guild? And those two writers, were emboldened and inspired by what they heard from their guild contacts. And and a lot of it too, ever since the pandemic, our episode order has just through the roof. We used to be responsible for, in the very, very early days, we were responsible for about 46 episodes a year. Now we're delivering 336 a year. Wow. So the increase is exponential, and it's bonkers. And the thing is, like, it just kept getting more and more and more, and we were still expected to do it. And at some point it was just like, all right, we're willing to do it. We love the show. We love our jobs. But there has to be some sort of give here. There has to be fairer compensation. There has to be a reason, we're having stress dreams about clips at night, and scripts, and, we have to have some sort of fair compensation for this. And so that's when really, a couple writers took the lead. They started reaching out to each and every one of us, individual phone calls, feeling us out, making it very clear, if we do this, we have to do this together. We have to be a united front. Yeah, that was around January, February of last year, of 2023. Yep.
Wow. That makes me wonder, though, like, what does it feel like to get that call about we want to band together? I know, because I imagine it's going to be scary. You don't know, are there going to be repercussions? Like, what was that like?
100%.
Very, very scary. And just, we're comics. A lot of us come from the stand-up background, so we're not really used to making a lot of money. We'll deal with the money that we make. We're comics. We're used to going out there and working for chicken wings and bar drinks. And if we get paid, we're happy to get paid. So it's kind of scary when somebody says, hey, we're going to band together and this may or may not work. And you might lose the job that you've kind of worked very hard to get already. So it's very scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it was terrifying. Job security is huge, especially in this industry. And, to have a job that we basically work year round because of the episode orders and the demands and everything like that. We know that we are very fortunate to have that. And so it was scary, the potential of losing it. But at the end of the day, after conversations, and a million Zooms, just us before we even got in contact with our WGA contact and our representatives and everything like that, just Zoom after Zoom of us being like, we're weighing our options because this is terrifying. This affects our household income potentially. This can affect our work environment if they get wind of it, before we, went public with our union cards and everything. And what will the repercussions be? Will we be jobless because we're taking this first step? And I know for me personally, my husband also works for this show as well. So I was like,
Oh, wow.
now if I join this, he's in a different department, but I was like, if I do this, am I also jeopardizing his job? And that's our entire household income just gone if this blows up. And so I, personally, I had to weigh, that as well. But all of us were making these decisions. And I think at the end of the day, what it really came down to was this was the right thing to do. This had to be done. We do a lot of work. We make a lot of episodes. We make a lot of money for the company and the network. And it's just, it had to be done. It was the right thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. So can you talk about what were some of the most important issues to you? Because obviously you had more to gain than there was to lose.
Yeah, money. I mean, money was a big issue. We were working on weekends. Our spare time. I mean, the Google Doc is on our phone. I mean, I'm constantly working. All the time now. Still now too, but now it's worth it. So I think money was definitely a big issue. Security. You just want to make sure that you're just getting compensated fairly for the work that you put in, and everybody else is getting compensated. So it's like, hey, I deserve it as well. And just, all the other things too. You want that, being in the WGA, you want that support too. If that's one of the things about this campaign, it felt really good to see people really have your back. And I enjoy that. I have these new relationships, when other campaigns come out, I'm gonna go out there and do the same thing that other people did for us. So I think it's definitely about money. It's definitely about security, but support as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to echo that, the support was phenomenal. We joined the striking guild members when they were, during that big long break in the summer. We would join them at Paramount or wherever. But then when we took our really big step and we went to our specific set on a shoot day to pass out flyers and to leaflet and to pass out buttons and say, we're here, we're trying to get this union done, would love your support. The fact that there were guild members that weren't affiliated with our show at all standing there with us at 6:30 in the morning in the freezing cold and just being like, we got you, like we're here with you, we'll also hand out flyers. And it was overwhelming. It was just such a wonderful feeling to be like, we really have been embraced fully and we're not even in the guild yet. It was tremendous. It was terrific.
Yeah. Just understanding what other writers go through. And I'm glad you talked about how much you work, because I think a lot of times on shows that appear unscripted, like Ridiculousness, and it seems like it's all improvised, but people don't realize anything the host is saying, like that's, and all of those jokes that are happening in the clips, those things are written. So I'm really glad you talked about your workload, because that's intense.
Yeah.
So what were some of the key, like essential elements or key moments in getting your first union contract? I know you talked about like going out and leafleting. What are some other things that you guys had to do, really big moments?
I say that day we went to the production set and we actually got to talk to Rob,
Nice.
and I think that was our first time having it was a 1-on-8 or 1-on-10, but that was the first time we actually got to just he saw our faces, let him know that we were serious about this, and just really got to tell him what we wanted, what we've been dealing with, and letting them know that we're really serious about this and we're willing to go through it. And I think that was a big movement for us and for him,
I think Greg's right. I think that was the biggest single day for us during this campaign. Other big days were signing the union cards. A lot of us got together to do that at once, and some of us had to do it separate days. Signing the union cards was big. When we felt that we were being dismissed by management at the company, we all got together and signed an official. I'm sure there's a specific WGA union phrase for it, but it was some sort of letter that was like, we basically won't be ignored. This isn't going away. You've had 3 months to acknowledge the union, to acknowledge us. You're not doing it, and so these moments when we're all together, it feels more possible. And then, we had a meeting at the WGA offices, December of last year, where once again, we were all together and our WGA representatives and the lawyers and everything were like, are you prepared to take next steps. Are you prepared to strike? And to have everybody in the room be like, yes, considering with the risks, all the risks and the potential reward are being weighed here, and we are willing to do this, and we are willing to do this together. And so just every single one of those days when it was all of us together and being like, here's another step forward, here's the next step forward. And that day on set was the biggest day, Rob coming out and being like, what? And us being like, so it's just been,
it wasn't like a scheduled meeting.
No, God, no. I think he got like a heads up well on his way to set, and then all of a sudden he gets there, and we're all just, we got the flag, we're in the WGA shirts, and we're just like, can we talk to you for a minute? So it was a big day, and I think that really turned the tide for us.
That's hardcore.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what it was like to find out that you got the contract?
Man, just happiness, also just grateful that it's over. I mean, it's so stressful, and we're still working. It's not like the load isn't off of us. We're still dealing with this. Our families are dealing with this. Our my wife, my loved ones, so I think it was just good to be done with it. Happy that we're done with it. And and just and the feeling of like being heard and actually winning too. And and I think it was good for everybody too. I think it was good for the company to recognize us and let us and let them help, let them help them to help us. You know what I mean? Like just giving them the keys to like, hey, this is what we want. Can you just do this? And and I think it felt good for Rob too, to a win for everybody, basically, but definitely humbling, grateful to the WGA. It just felt it felt really good, and it just felt great to be seen and heard.
Yeah, it's amazing how much support you have. And then just to think about what you did going forward, like it's historic what you did, and that the future generations of writers on that show won't have to go through it again. And you're also like a model for other writers who, don't have the backing of a union to go forward, even though it's scary, even though they're afraid. So thank you so much for your efforts and for being able to share so clearly, about what happened. And if you're looking for more on the labor fights around town, Uniontown is also a column on writtenby.com, the official publication of the Writers Guild of America West. It's now entirely online, in your inboxes, and multimedia, bringing you the resources and perspective you need as a professional writer or aspiring one. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you for everything.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.